In the 5th century before the Common Era, a Greek philosopher presented a simple experiment that challenged every assumption about motion. He imagined the fastest runner, Achilles, racing a slow tortoise, then used pure logic to argue that Achilles could never catch it, no matter how fast he ran. But this wasn't just another party trick. Zeno's setup is brutally straightforward. Achilles gives the tortoise a head start. Before he can overtake it, he must first reach the point where the tortoise began. By the time he gets there, the tortoise has moved on. Now, Achilles must reach this new point, but again, by the time he arrives, the tortoise has advanced a little further. Each time Achilles closes the gap, a smaller gap appears in front of him. Logic slices the race into infinitely many smaller and smaller segments Achilles has to cross. And if crossing infinitely many segments seems to require infinite time, then Achilles never actually catches the tortoise. Common sense insists he wins easily. Zeno's paradox coldly replies, under this reasoning, he doesn't. And that contradiction is where the real mystery begins. This isn't just mathematical wordplay. This is pure logical reasoning, proving that motion itself is impossible. Yet you just moved your eyes to read these words. You're breathing. Your heart is beating. The paradox reveals that either our logic is fundamentally flawed, or our experience of movement is a massive deception. Ancient Greek philosopher Zeno created this paradox to defend his teacher's claim that all motion is illusion. For over 2,000 years, mathematicians and physicists have tried to solve it. They can calculate where moving objects will intersect, but they can't resolve the philosophical problem. Mathematics describes what happens, but it doesn't explain how infinite subdivisions of space and time can be traversed in finite duration. The paradox forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. What if continuous motion, as we experience it, doesn't actually exist? What if reality consists of discrete jumps so small and fast that our consciousness creates the illusion of smooth movement? Modern physics suggests space and time might indeed be quantized into smallest possible units, but this only pushes the paradox deeper. How do objects jump between these units without traversing the space between them? Zeno's paradox reveals the first fundamental crack in reality's foundation. Our direct experience contradicts logical analysis. Either reasoning itself is unreliable, or the world we perceive is hiding its true nature behind convincing appearances. The ship of Theseus, when identity becomes impossible. Imagine you own a wooden ship. Over time, individual planks begin rotting and need replacement. You replace one plank with new wood. The ship is still obviously the same vessel. You replace another plank, then another. Still the same ship, right? But here's where reality starts fracturing. You continue this process until every single original plank has been replaced with new wood. Not one piece of the original ship remains. Is this still the same ship? Logic suggests yes, because you never replaced everything at once. You maintained continuity through gradual change. Now imagine someone collected all your discarded original planks and reassembled them into a ship using the original configuration. Which vessel is the real ship of Theseus? The one with all new parts that maintained continuity, or the one built from all original materials? Both ships have equal claim to being the original. The continuous ship maintained unbroken existence, but lost all original substance. The reassembled ship contains all original matter, but lost temporal continuity. Logic cannot determine which deserves the identity of the original. This paradox destroys our concept of identity over time. If objects can't maintain consistent identity through change, then nothing in the universe remains the same from one moment to the next. Your body replaces billions of cells daily. Over 7 years, virtually every cell in your body gets replaced with new matter. Are you the same person you were a decade ago? You contain almost entirely different physical matter. Your thoughts have changed. Your beliefs have evolved. Your personality has developed. What makes you you, if not your matter, your thoughts, or your characteristics? The Ship of Theseus paradox proves that identity itself might be a useful fiction. Objects and people don't maintain consistent existence over time. What we call identity is actually a constantly changing collection of parts that our minds treat as unified wholes. Reality consists of processes, not things. Existence is flux, not substance. Plato's cave. When reality is just shadows on the wall. Picture prisoners chained in an underground cave since birth. They face a wall where shadows dance, cast by objects behind them that they cannot see. These shadows represent their entire reality. They develop sophisticated theories about shadow behavior, create shadow categories, and build their entire worldview around shadow patterns. One day, a prisoner breaks free and discovers the shadows are projections of real objects illuminated by fire. The objects themselves are more real than their shadows. But then he emerges from the cave entirely and discovers sunlight revealing a world incomparably more real than anything in the cave. When he returns to share this revelation, the other prisoners think he's insane. They refuse to believe their shadow reality is illusion. They're so committed to their limited perspective that they would kill anyone who challenged their fundamental assumptions about existence. Plato's allegory suggests our entire sensory experience might be shadow projections of a deeper reality we cannot directly perceive. What we consider physical matter, space, time, and consciousness could be mere appearances of something infinitely more fundamental operating beyond our comprehension. Modern physics supports this unsettling possibility. Quantum mechanics reveals that particles don't have definite properties until measured. The act of observation determines what becomes real. Reality at the smallest scale consists of probability waves that collapse into specific states only when consciousness encounters them. String theory suggests the particles we consider fundamental are actually vibrating strings in dimensions we cannot perceive. Our entire universe might be a hologram projected from information encoded on its boundary. What we experience as three-dimensional space could be shadow projections of patterns existing in higher dimensions. The cave allegory forces us to question whether human consciousness is equipped to perceive reality accurately. Our senses evolved to help us survive, not to reveal truth. They show us useful illusions that promote survival and reproduction, not accurate representations of what exists. If our perceptions are evolutionary adaptations, rather than truth-revealing mechanisms, then everything we consider real might be sophisticated fiction. The solid world we inhabit could be no more real than shadows dancing on a cave wall, convincing only because we've never experienced anything else. Descartes' evil demon. When everything becomes questionable. Imagine a being of infinite power and cunning whose sole purpose is deceiving you. This entity controls every sensation you experience, every thought that enters your mind, every memory you possess. The world you perceive, the people you know, even your own body could be elaborate illusions this demon creates to mislead you. You think you're reading these words, but the demon might be implanting the experience directly into your consciousness. You believe you have hands, but they could be phantom sensations with no corresponding physical reality. Your memories of childhood, your relationships, your entire personal history might be fabricated experiences the demon installed moments ago. This isn't science fiction speculation. This is a rigorous philosophical argument that reveals the impossibility of verifying our most basic beliefs about reality. Since we can never step outside our own experience to check its accuracy, we cannot rule out comprehensive deception. Every method we might use to verify reality depends on the very faculties that could be deceived. You might think scientific instruments provide objective measurement, but your perception of these instruments and their readings comes through the same potentially compromised senses. You might appeal to other people for confirmation, but your experience of other people could be part of the deception. The evil demon argument doesn't claim such deception actually occurs. It demonstrates that the possibility cannot be eliminated. Since we cannot prove we're not being deceived, our beliefs about external reality lack the certainty we assume they possess. Modern technology makes this scenario increasingly plausible. Virtual reality systems create convincing sensory experiences of non-existent environments. Brain stimulation can trigger specific thoughts and sensations. If technology can already create limited illusions, what prevents a sufficiently advanced system from creating complete deception? The evil demon paradox reveals that consciousness might be the only indubitable reality. Even if everything else is illusion, the fact that you experience thoughts proves something exists to be deceived. But this leaves everything beyond immediate consciousness permanently uncertain. Your entire world could be a simulation, a dream, or a deception so sophisticated that no internal evidence could reveal its artificial nature. The solid reality you trust might be no more substantial than a perfectly convincing nightmare from which you never wake up. Human consciousness faces an inescapable epistemological prison. We cannot verify our beliefs about external reality because verification requires the very faculties that might be compromised. This doesn't prove reality is illusion, but it proves we cannot know whether it is or isn't. The evil demon argument forces us to confront the possibility that certainty itself might be impossible. Everything you consider obviously true could be elaborate fiction. The only honest response might be acknowledging that the nature of reality remains permanently beyond human knowledge. These four paradoxes reveal cracks in reality's foundation that grow wider under examination. Motion appears impossible yet obviously occurs. Identity dissolves under logical analysis, yet seems undeniably real. Perception might be shadow projection, yet feels completely solid. Knowledge itself might be impossible, yet we depend on it constantly. Each paradox challenges different aspects of our basic assumptions about existence, but together they point toward a disturbing conclusion. Reality, as we experience it, contains fundamental contradictions that cannot be resolved through normal reasoning. Either logic itself is unreliable, or the world we inhabit operates according to principles that transcend human comprehension. But these classical paradoxes are just the beginning. What quantum physics has discovered about reality's deepest levels makes these philosophical puzzles look almost quaint by comparison. Quantum superposition. When particles exist, everywhere and nowhere. Here's where reality takes a nosedive into absolute madness. In the quantum realm, particles don't just bend the rules of logic, they obliterate them completely. A single electron can exist in multiple locations simultaneously until the moment you try to observe it. This isn't theoretical speculation anymore. This is documented, repeatable, laboratory-verified insanity. The double-slit experiment proves this impossible reality. Fire electrons one at a time through two parallel slits toward a detection screen. Logic says each electron must pass through either the left slit or the right slit, but the interference pattern that emerges proves each individual electron somehow passed through both slits simultaneously. This breaks everything we understand about existence. Objects cannot be in two places at once. Particles cannot travel multiple paths simultaneously. Yet quantum mechanics demonstrates this happens constantly at the microscopic level. Reality, at its most fundamental, operates according to principles that make logical reasoning completely useless. The moment you try to determine which slit the electron actually used, the interference pattern disappears. The act of measurement forces the electron to choose a single path retroactively. Before observation, it existed in superposition, taking all possible paths simultaneously. After observation, it collapsed into a single definite state. This suggests consciousness plays a fundamental role in determining what becomes real. Without an observer, particles exist as probability clouds spread across multiple potential states. Reality doesn't consist of definite objects with specific properties. It consists of infinite possibilities that crystallize into particular outcomes only when awareness encounters them. The implications shatter our concept of objective reality. If fundamental particles don't have definite properties until observed, then the entire universe might exist in superposition until consciousness collapses it into specific configurations. What we consider solid matter could be probability patterns that our minds interpret as physical objects. Quantum superposition proves that reality operates according to principles that contradict everything our everyday experience teaches us. The microscopic foundation of the universe follows rules that make classical logic irrelevant. Either our reasoning is fundamentally flawed, or reality itself transcends rational comprehension. Schrödinger's cat. When life and death become simultaneous. Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger created this thought experiment to expose the absurdity of quantum mechanics applied to everyday objects. Place a cat in a sealed box with a device that has a 50% chance of releasing poison based on quantum decay. According to quantum theory, until someone opens the box to observe, the cat exists in superposition of being both alive and dead simultaneously. This isn't just abstract mathematics. If quantum mechanics accurately describes reality, then the cat genuinely exists in both states until observation collapses the superposition into either life or death. The boundary between microscopic quantum weirdness and macroscopic everyday experience becomes meaningless. The paradox reveals the measurement problem that haunts quantum physics. At what point does superposition collapse into definite reality? When the quantum event triggers the device? When the poison is released? When the cat dies? When someone opens the box? When consciousness processes the observation? No clear dividing line separates quantum uncertainty from classical definiteness. If particles can exist in superposition, why not molecules? If molecules can exist in multiple states, why not cells? If cells can exist in superposition, why not organisms? If organisms can exist in multiple states simultaneously, why not people? Schrödinger's cat forces us to confront the possibility that everything exists in superposition until consciousness collapses possibilities into actualities. Your entire body might exist in quantum superposition of infinite potential states until your awareness forces specific configurations to manifest. The paradox suggests that consciousness doesn't just observe reality. Consciousness creates reality by choosing which possibilities become actual. Without awareness, the universe might exist as pure potential without any definite properties whatsoever. This transforms our understanding of existence completely. Instead of discovering a pre-existing world, consciousness might be actively constructing reality moment by moment through the choices it makes about what to observe. The cat isn't alive or dead before measurement. It's neither and both until awareness forces a decision. The measurement problem, when observation creates reality. Quantum mechanics reveals that particles don't possess definite properties until measured. Before observation, an electron doesn't have a specific location, velocity, or spin direction. It exists as a probability wave encompassing all possible states simultaneously. The act of measurement collapses this wave function into a single, definite outcome. But this creates an impossible paradox. What constitutes measurement? Does it require conscious observation, or can any interaction collapse the wave function? If consciousness isn't required, why does the presence of observers seem to affect experimental outcomes? The measurement problem exposes a fundamental contradiction in our understanding of reality. Either consciousness plays a special role in determining physical events, or the boundary between quantum and classical behavior remains mysteriously undefined. Both possibilities challenge everything we consider scientifically reasonable. If consciousness collapses wave functions, then minds directly influence physical reality through the act of observation. This suggests Reality doesn't exist independently of awareness. The universe might be fundamentally mental rather than physical, with matter emerging from consciousness rather than consciousness emerging from matter. If consciousness doesn't collapse wave functions, then something else determines when quantum superposition ends and classical definiteness begins. But no clear mechanism explains this transition. The measurement problem reveals that quantum mechanics works perfectly for making predictions, but fails completely to explain what's actually happening. Recent experiments have demonstrated that the measurement problem isn't just theoretical. Quantum effects can be maintained in increasingly large systems under the right conditions. The boundary between quantum and classical behavior appears arbitrary rather than fundamental. This suggests that everything might exist in quantum superposition all the time. What we consider classical behavior might be an illusion created by the rapid collapse and reformation of quantum states. Reality could be constantly flickering between existence and non-existence so quickly that our consciousness creates the appearance of stability. Wigner's friend, when objective reality becomes impossible. Eugene Wigner extended the measurement problem by imagining his friend performing a quantum measurement inside a sealed laboratory. From the friend's perspective inside the lab, the measurement produces a definite outcome. The quantum system collapses into a specific state when observed. But from Wigner's perspective outside the lab, the friend becomes entangled with the quantum system and exists in superposition along with it. The friend simultaneously observes different outcomes until Wigner opens the laboratory to check the results. This creates an impossible situation. The friend experiences a definite measurement result, while Wigner's equations predict the friend exists in superposition of experiencing different results. Both perspectives follow quantum mechanics correctly, yet they reach contradictory conclusions about what happened. Recent experiments have confirmed this paradox using photons instead of people. Quantum systems can be prepared where different observers reach incompatible conclusions about the same events. The measurements aren't wrong. The mathematical framework isn't flawed. Reality itself appears inconsistent. Wigner's friend paradox proves that objective reality might not exist. If different observers can witness incompatible versions of the same events, then there's no single truth about what actually happens. Reality becomes observer-dependent rather than observer-independent. This destroys the foundation of scientific objectivity. Science assumes there's one reality that all observers can agree upon through careful measurement. But quantum mechanics suggests that different observers might inhabit fundamentally different realities that cannot be reconciled. The paradox forces us to choose between equally disturbing possibilities. Either consciousness directly influences physical events through observation, or objective reality doesn't exist, and everything becomes subjective interpretation. Neither option preserves our common sense understanding of how the world works. Quantum entanglement, when separation becomes meaningless. Two particles can become quantum entangled, creating a connection that transcends space and time. Measuring one particle instantly determines the state of its partner, regardless of the distance separating them. This happens faster than light could travel between them, violating everything we understand about causality and locality. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance and refused to believe it could be real. He argued that hidden variables must determine the particle's properties in advance, making the correlation appear instantaneous while actually being predetermined. But experiments have repeatedly confirmed that quantum entanglement violates local realism. No hidden variables can explain the correlations. The particles genuinely lack definite properties until measured, yet their measurements remain perfectly correlated across arbitrary distances. This proves that separateness itself might be an illusion. If particles can maintain instantaneous connection regardless of spatial separation, then distance becomes meaningless at the quantum level. The universe might be fundamentally interconnected in ways that transcend our experience of isolated objects in separate locations. Quantum entanglement suggests that information can travel faster than light, or that space and time don't exist at the deepest level of reality. Either possibility demolishes our understanding of physics and causality. The phenomenon forces us to reconsider the nature of identity and relationship. If entangled particles remain connected despite separation, what constitutes an individual object? Where does one particle end and another begin? The boundaries we perceive between distinct entities might be artificial constructs rather than fundamental features of reality. Entanglement reveals that the universe operates as an integrated whole rather than a collection of separate parts. What we consider independent objects might be aspects of a single undivided system that appears fragmented only from our limited perspective. These quantum paradoxes don't just challenge individual assumptions about reality. They systematically demolish every foundation of rational understanding. Motion, identity, perception, knowledge, measurement, objectivity, and separateness all dissolve under quantum scrutiny. But the most disturbing revelation is still ahead. What happens when we apply these paradoxes to consciousness itself? The observer effect, when consciousness breaks physics. Here's where everything becomes absolutely terrifying. The observer effect in quantum mechanics reveals that consciousness doesn't just witness reality. Consciousness fundamentally alters the physical structure of the universe through the simple act of looking. When scientists monitor which slit a photon passes through in the double-slit experiment, the interference pattern vanishes completely. The photon behaves like a classical particle instead of a quantum wave. But here's the mind-breaking part. This happens even when the detection equipment records the information without any human actually looking at the results. The universe somehow knows when information about quantum events becomes available to consciousness, even if that consciousness never actually accesses the information. Simply having the possibility of observation changes physical reality at the most fundamental level. This creates an impossible paradox about the relationship between mind and matter. Either consciousness possesses some special physical property that affects quantum systems, or the universe operates according to principles that anticipate conscious observation. Both possibilities shatter everything we consider scientifically reasonable. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment pushes this paradox into pure insanity. Scientists can decide whether to observe which path information after a photon has already been detected. Their future choice retroactively determines whether the photon traveled as a wave or particle in the past. This proves that consciousness can influence events that have already happened. The timeline of cause and effect becomes meaningless when awareness can reach backward through time to alter previous physical states. Reality doesn't just depend on consciousness. It depends on future conscious decisions that haven't been made yet. The observer effect suggests that the entire universe might exist in quantum superposition until consciousness collapses it into specific configurations. Without awareness, nothing would have definite properties. The cosmos would remain pure potential without any actual manifestations. The bootstrap paradox, when causality eats its own tail. Imagine you travel back in time and give Shakespeare a book containing all his plays. He publishes them under his name, becoming the famous playwright history remembers. But where did the plays originally come from? Shakespeare didn't write them. You gave them to him. But you got them from history books that recorded Shakespeare's work. This creates a causal loop where information exists without origin. The plays created themselves through a circular chain of causation that has no beginning point. Effect becomes cause, which becomes effect, in an endless cycle that violates everything we understand about logical sequence. The bootstrap paradox reveals that causality itself might be an illusion. If effects can create their own causes through temporal loops, then the entire concept of linear progression from cause to effect becomes meaningless. events don't flow from past to future. They exist in self-creating cycles that transcend temporal sequence. Modern physics suggests the bootstrap paradox might be more than theoretical speculation. In quantum mechanics, virtual particles pop into existence from vacuum energy and immediately annihilate themselves. These particles violate conservation laws temporarily, borrowing energy from the future to exist briefly in the present. If particles can exist without sufficient cause by borrowing from future states, then causality operates in closed loops rather than linear chains. The universe might be full of self-creating phenomena that exist because they will exist, not because they were caused by previous events. The paradox forces us to confront the possibility that time itself might be fundamentally illusory. Past, present, and future might be arbitrary designations we impose on a reality that exists as a complete, eternal pattern where all moments coexist simultaneously. The grandfather paradox. When logic destroys itself. You travel back in time and accidentally prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. This prevents your father from being born, which prevents you from being born. But if you were never born, you couldn't have traveled back in time to prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. This creates a logical contradiction that cannot be resolved within any consistent framework. Either time travel is impossible, or logic itself breaks down when applied to temporal paradoxes. Both conclusions devastate our understanding of reality's fundamental structure. The many worlds interpretation attempts to resolve this paradox by suggesting that changing the past creates alternate timelines rather than altering the original sequence. When you prevent your grandfather's meeting, you create a new universe where you're never born while remaining in the original timeline where you exist. But this solution multiplies the paradox infinitely. Every quantum event creates countless parallel universes containing every possible outcome. Reality becomes an infinite collection of branching timelines where every possible version of events actually occurs somewhere. This means that every choice you don't make creates alternate versions of yourself who make different decisions. Every quantum measurement spawns countless universes containing every possible result. The universe splits into infinite copies of itself countless times per second. If the many worlds interpretation is correct, then individual identity becomes meaningless. There are infinite versions of you making every conceivable choice in parallel timelines. Your sense of being a unique individual is an illusion created by experiencing only one branch of an infinitely branching tree of possibilities. The grandfather paradox proves that either time travel violates logical consistency, or logical consistency doesn't apply to temporal phenomena. Either conclusion suggests that reality operates according to principles that transcend rational analysis. The simulation hypothesis, when reality becomes computation. Philosopher Nick Bostrom demonstrated that if advanced civilizations developed the ability to run detailed simulations of their ancestors, then the number of simulated beings would vastly outnumber biological ones. By pure probability, you're more likely to be a simulated consciousness than a biological organism. This isn't science fiction speculation. This is a rigorous statistical argument based on reasonable assumptions about technological development. If simulating consciousness becomes possible, advanced civilizations would run countless historical simulations for research, entertainment, or education. Each simulation could contain billions of conscious beings who experience their artificial reality as completely authentic. These simulated consciousnesses would develop science, philosophy, and technology within their programmed environment, never suspecting their entire universe consists of computational processes. The simulation hypothesis suggests that everything you consider real, your body, your memories, your relationships, even your thoughts, might be information patterns running on some unimaginably advanced computer system. Your entire existence could be software rather than biology. Modern technology makes this possibility increasingly plausible. Virtual reality systems create convincing sensory experiences. Artificial intelligence exhibits increasingly sophisticated behavior. Brain-computer interfaces demonstrate that consciousness can interact with digital systems. If current technological trends continue, creating fully immersive simulations of conscious beings becomes an engineering problem rather than a fundamental impossibility. Once such technology exists, simulated beings would outnumber biological ones exponentially. The hypothesis forces us to question the reliability of our most basic perceptions. If perfect simulation is possible, then no internal evidence could distinguish simulated from authentic experience. A simulated being would find their artificial world as convincing as you find yours. This creates an unfalsifiable scenario where the nature of reality becomes permanently unknowable. Whether you're biological or digital, physical or computational, becomes a question that cannot be answered from within your experience. The paradox of the present moment, when now becomes impossible. Time appears to flow from past through present into future, but careful analysis reveals that the present moment cannot actually exist. The past no longer exists. The future doesn't exist yet. If the present is the boundary between past and future, then it has no duration and therefore cannot contain any events. But if the present has no duration, then nothing ever actually happens. All events must occur across some interval of time, yet any interval contains past, present, and future segments. No event can be purely present because any duration spans multiple temporal states. This paradox reveals that our experience of temporal flow might be fundamentally illusory. We seem to exist in an ever-changing present moment, but analysis proves such a moment cannot exist. Either our experience is deceptive, or time itself operates according to principles that transcend logical analysis. Modern physics suggests that time might not flow at all. Einstein's relativity demonstrates that simultaneity is relative. Events that are simultaneous in one reference frame occur at different times in another frame. There's no universal present moment that applies throughout the universe. Block universe theory proposes that all moments in time exist equally. Past, present, and future are equally real from a four-dimensional perspective that includes time as a spatial dimension. What we experience as temporal flow might be an artifact of consciousness moving through a static temporal landscape. If the block universe model is correct, then change itself becomes illusory. Nothing actually becomes different over time because all temporal states exist simultaneously in the four-dimensional block. What we interpret as change is simply consciousness accessing different temporal cross-sections of an unchanging reality. The paradox of the present forces us to question whether temporal experience reflects anything real about the universe's structure. The flowing time that seems so fundamental to existence might be a persistent illusion created by consciousness, encountering a static, eternal reality. The problem of personal identity. When you become multiple people. Every night when you fall asleep, your stream of consciousness interrupts completely. The person who wakes up in the morning has your memories and inhabits your body. But is this the same consciousness that went to sleep? Or did the original consciousness die during sleep while a new consciousness with identical memories took its place? You cannot verify continuity of consciousness through unconscious periods because, by definition, you're not conscious to witness the transition. The subjective experience of waking up feels like resuming interrupted awareness, but this feeling could be implanted memory rather than actual continuity. This problem extends beyond sleep to any interruption of conscious experience. General anesthesia, comas, even brief moments of unconsciousness create gaps where personal identity becomes questionable. Each resumption of awareness might represent a new consciousness with inherited memories rather than the original awareness returning. The teleporter paradox pushes this identity crisis to its logical conclusion. Imagine a device that scans your body and brain at the quantum level, transmits this information to Mars, and reconstructs you perfectly while destroying the original. The reconstructed person has identical memories, personality, and physical structure. Are you the same person who entered the teleporter, or are you a copy who thinks they're the original? If the original body weren't destroyed, there would be two people with equal claim to being you. Which one deserves your identity? The problem reveals that personal identity might be a useful fiction rather than a fundamental reality. What you consider your continuous self might be a series of momentary consciousnesses, each inheriting memories from its predecessor, but lacking genuine connection to past or future selves. If consciousness cannot be proven to persist through interruptions, then the self you consider real might die and be reborn countless times throughout each day. Every moment of awareness might be the birth of a new consciousness that mistakenly believes it has existed continuously. These paradoxes systematically demolish every foundation of rational understanding about reality, consciousness, and existence itself. They prove that the world we inhabit operates according to principles that transcend logical analysis and defy common sense. But the most disturbing implication is that these aren't separate problems with individual solutions. They're interconnected aspects of a deeper truth about the nature of existence that human reasoning cannot fully comprehend. These 10 paradoxes aren't just intellectual curiosities that philosophers debate in academic journals. They're systematic proof that reality itself might be the greatest illusion ever conceived. Every foundation you've built your understanding of existence upon crumbles under logical scrutiny. Motion proves impossible, yet obviously occurs. Identity dissolves while feeling absolutely real. Consciousness creates reality through observation while remaining trapped within its own perceptions. Time flows in contradictory directions while possibly not existing at all. Even your sense of being a continuous self might be elaborate fiction. What makes this revelation truly terrifying is that these paradoxes don't cancel each other out. They compound exponentially, creating a cumulative case that everything you consider real operates according to principles that transcend human comprehension. The solid world you trust might be shadows on a cave wall, quantum fluctuations in probability space, or computational processes running on some unimaginable system. Perhaps the most honest response to these paradoxes isn't solving them, but embracing the profound uncertainty they reveal. Maybe reality isn't meant to be understood through logic and reasoning. Maybe existence itself is fundamentally paradoxical, operating beyond the either-or thinking that governs everyday experience. The next time you feel absolutely certain about anything, remember these paradoxes. Question not just what you think you know, but whether knowing itself is possible. Because if these 10 impossibilities have taught us anything, it's that reality might be far stranger, more mysterious, and more illusory than human consciousness can ever grasp.